The showrunner of She-Hulk has decided to respond to people who are critical of the character's bad CGI. I know what you're thinking, bad CGI in the MCU? Isn't that expected at this point? I mean, even Taika Waititi made fun of this.
Does that look real?
In that particular shot, no, actually. It doesn't really, right? When you look close.
Does it need to be more blue?
Well, he changes hues, don't you think?
Yeah.
Put in the light. Sometimes he's blue, sometimes he's a little grayish.
He probably shouldn't have done that, as it comes across as the director making fun of his crew's work, but the world just had to know. How else could they have come to the conclusion that the MCU has bad CGI? I mean, what could he have done? Not what the She-Hulk director did, that's for sure. So in response to the criticisms people had with She-Hulk CGI, the director had this to say. You know, in terms of the CGI being critiqued, I do think that has to do with our culture's belief in their ownership of women's bodies. I think a lot of the critique comes from feeling like they're able to tear apart the CGI woman. There's a lot of talk about her body type, and you know, we based her a lot on Olympic athletes and not bodybuilders, but I think if we'd gone the other way, we would be facing the same critique. I know what you're thinking. What a stupid thing to say. She is actually trying to spin the criticisms of She-Hulk's bad CGI on sexism. It's about people claiming ownership of women's bodies. First off, this has nothing to do with her being a woman or the shape of her body. It's the fact that her face and body looks fake. Marvel is known for having terrible CGI, and She-Hulk is just another one of their countless examples. And people are just calling them out on it. Second, how dare you take a basic criticism of bad CGI, a very common and fair criticism that many movies over the decades have received, and spin it to accuse those who are critical of being sexist pigs. And thirdly, it is very tone deaf for her to play victims to CGI women here, when the real victims in this whole situation is the VFX artists, the very people who have been making the rounds recently and called out Marvel as their worst client. VFX artists who are underpaid, overworked, rushed, and spend countless days on CGI even on their days off, to the point that the compositor who worked on the first Avengers said that the whole VFX industry seemed depressed when they heard the announcement of Marvel Phase 5 and 6. And she is trying to take the CGI criticisms and say this is just people being cruel to CGI women, to fake, non-existing CGI women. Why don't you just be gracious, humble yourself and say, okay, we hear your criticisms. You know, something like that, instead of just accusing your viewers of hating the CGI because they're woman bashers who want to tear apart the CGI woman, even though there are countless women out there who are also saying the CGI for She-Hulk looks fake. So yeah, this is just nonsense. And don't let her gaslight you or make you feel guilty for calling out bad CGI. Disney and Marvel are one of the most profitable movie studios out there, and it is shocking how in spite of that, they make the worst looking movies. I mean, they don't even use basic props anymore like they used to over a decade ago. Look at that, it looks like a chicken's butt has been CGI to his face. They don't have background battles happen in camera anymore either, and they can't even get basic green screens to look real anymore. Instead, they just overwork the VFX artists to the point that they emotionally break down and even cry. And you can see the pain and emotional dismantling of the VFX employees come through in their work for the recent Marvel projects. This doesn't look like the work of passionate VFX artists, and that's because they're not. Under the MCU, they feel devalued and overworked. You can look this stuff up, it's really quite sad. But yeah, the real victim here for the bad CGI is women. Sure it is. This was a stupid thing to say, and to deviously spin it and portray those that have genuine criticisms of being sexist, that is just despicable. I personally think the CGI on She-Hulk looks very inconsistent. It looks decent in some parts, and then she looks like an uncanny valley CGI creation at others. Either way, the CGI in many MCU movies and shows look bad, and criticize it all you want, because if you keep giving Marvel a pass, then the CGI, much like their jokes, will only get worse with their future projects.